all of you to this series, Thought Leadership series from BNK. I'm Sanjeev Mota, and we are delighted to have Mr. Srikanth Reddy, promoter and joint managing director of Sagar Cement, with us today. So we'll spend some 45 minutes, and what we'll discuss is we'll talk about the India cement industry, where it stacks up in terms of the environmental norms, where is Sagar's journey within that whole ESG framework. We'll also talk about the long-term outlook of the cement industry in India, and again where Sagar is placed. After that, we'll open it up for Q&A. And anyway, if you have some questions, you can always type it up in the Q&A box. I'll moderate and ask those questions. So that's how we'll do it. And while I don't think I need to introduce Mr. Reddy, but I'll still do it. So Mr. Srikanth Reddy, he did his bachelor's degree in industrial and production engineering from Karnataka University, and he also holds a postgraduate diploma in cement technology from NCCBM. He has been with Sagar Cement since 2002, and he worked his way all the way to the top. Now he's a joint managing director. Along with his brother, Dr. Anand Reddy, he has made Sagar Cement into one of the most efficient companies in terms of cost and the way it is run in India. I think it is one of the most efficient ones. And in terms of, you'll see when we talk in terms of ESG adherence also, I think it's probably one of the best. Welcome, Mr. Reddy, to this talk.
Yeah, Sanjeev, thank you again. Sincerely appreciate BNK and you for hosting us here. Yeah, the cement, of course, is our business, but we are extremely passionate about the topic, which is the ESG. Let me just update some of the friends whom I've been meeting and extremely happy to see them being part of this particular call. Our journey to ESG is not new. When this invite came, we were internally excited because our journey to ESG started close to 1.5 decades back. So that gives us some heads up on how we have done. And our journey started with a beautiful initiation from the IFC, that is the International Financial Corporation, Washington. Yeah, the introduction for us at that point of time started the ESG concepts, and everything started with that. Before that, obviously, we were just producer of cement. So the initiation happened much ahead of the curve, when you put it, compared to the Indian cycle. So we do have a set of people internally who primarily focus not only on the ESG, but looking at the various risk management framework that is yet to evolve. Other than being a cement producer, yeah, we also have an advisory firm part of the group where there is a dedicated team which actually starts looking at various aspects of the sector. And fortunately, though people are talking now, yeah, we actually were in a situation to look at each of these at a much longer period of time and with a clear-cut focus on any of these elements, Sanjeev. So we are extremely happy to be part of this particular conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. What I'll do is I'll start with the global from a global perspective. Where do we? So globally, whatever I read that 8% of all carbon emission is done by cement industry. So obviously that seems like a pretty large number. But if you look at India versus the rest of the world, where do we stack up?
Yeah, Sanjeev, let me start. See, of course, ESG is a core buzzword now, thanks to the climate change or the related topics that are happening around. Yeah, how much GHG the cement industry releases? Let me put it. We are one among the top emitters of the GHG. Our reaction to that is, unfortunately, if you look at the bigger ones, they are even more higher. But the avoidance is something which we have to be very careful with, because all the staples, be it food, be it milk, be it the entire supply chain, they are the largest emitters than the cement. But on the manufacturing side, unfortunately, we are part of one of the larger emitters, because the basic reaction here itself, when we burn the limestone, the formula is CaCO3, that is the calcium carbonate. So we retain the limestone, or rather the calcium oxide, and emit CO2. Typically, for every 1 ton of clinker, we end up generating 0.8 tons of CO2 as it stands. Yeah, that's the basic kind of a reaction. Unfortunately, the cement is consumed much more than any of the staples, be it wheat or rice. Other than water, I think this is one of the single most consumed commodity, not in cement form, but in the concrete form. So this is one of the largest consumer of the consumed commodity on earth. Unfortunately, it also emits the matching kind of a CO2. As an industry, it's very, very well organized. It is very well monitored. So unfortunately, there is a lot of hue and cry about the GHG emissions that we do from the sector. But at the same time, this sector is one of the first people who have pledged for the reduction of the GHG globally. And we are extremely proud that the Indian cement sector is one among the lowest well within the sector across the globe. Though not many people would appreciate, probably understand this, they might still think that the sector elsewhere, especially from the Western world or the emerged kind of a sector or fully developed world, people perceive that their sector is ahead of curve. That's not the case, sir. I think the Indian cement sector is one among the pioneers across the globe. In fact, we are on the top rung when it comes to the efficiency, and we are one among the lowest in terms of the emissions. That primarily comes from the fact that 80% of our Indian cement sector, the antiquity is very, very low. 80% of the installed capacity is less than 15 years old. And being 15 years old, so the newer generation equipment, newer generation technologies have been adopted. Yeah, that actually helped us to be not only be efficient, but also one among the lowest emitter in the sector from a cement sector perspective, Sanjeev. Now there are a lot of benchmarks that have been done, but unfortunately on the ESG front, most of the metric is still not yet fully developed, I would put it, because the disclosures are not apple to apple. Yeah, some people would emit, they would come back and disclose GHG emissions for ton of cement that they produce. And again, not all the 3 scopes are disclosed, but in spite of non-standardized kind of a disclosure, Indian cement sector in general would be one among the lowest, Sanjeev. Yeah, Sanjeev, I think you have to unmute yourself, sir.
Sorry. I was saying that if you can elaborate a bit more on this, because we do hear about waste heat recovery and so on. What are the other measures that the sector is doing? If you can talk a bit about that.
Now, first things first, sir. I think these are all toppings. Okay. Now let us look at the basic thing in the cement. As I mentioned to you, limestone is CaCO3. So you actually spend energy where it consumes to break the CaCO3. So there is some amount of CO2 that also gets added up with the fuel that we use. The basic reaction is same across the world. So CaCO3 has to be broken into CaO and CO2. But the quantum of energy, both electrical and thermal, that is consumed to produce 1 ton of clinker is very, very minimalistic in India. Yeah, because 70% of this cement industry is actually new generation. We have 6-stage preheaters or a 5-stage preheater, which is a lot more energy efficient. So it consumes lesser energy to produce the clinker. So we are extremely strong on that front. Yeah. Secondly, the limestone that gets consumed to produce a ton of clinker. There is a lot of mining activity that happens. So even the limestone grade that is in generally available in India. Again, it's a in general kind of a statement. It might vary from case to case. So the quantum of limestone that gets mined to produce a ton of clinker, we are also one among the lowest in the world. So there is there is very limited rejection. So there is very, very limited wastage even from a mining side. So whatever gets mined, in fact, in our own mines, we do not have, we have zero rejection. So whatever we mine actually goes into the clinker formation. 80% of our Indian mines, limestone mines, are cement grade mines. So everything gets consumed. So nothing is wasted there. These two form core of the emissions. Now secondary, how do we supplement the energy to electrical, especially the electrical energy to produce the cement? Now being energy intensive, and unfortunately energy is a very expensive proposition in India. So the waste heat recovery, though it's a large capex driven, but the payback period is very high because of the energy costs in India. So the industry though has adopted it lately, but has been aggressively investing on the waste heat generation from the exit gases. When I started my career close to 25 years back, the exit gas temperature used to be up of 400 plus degrees Celsius. The waste heat recovery potential also was very high, but the capex was more focused on the generation of clinker or cement and less on the waste heat recovery and all. Things have changed now. Things 6-stage preheater, it started coming close to 300. Now even the newer generation waste heat recovery system started generating 30 to 40% of electrical energy requirement from even the low quality heat that was coming out. Now the exit gas temperatures are sub of 100, sir. So you can imagine it was not just at the emission level in terms of the GHGs, but even the hot gas that was coming out, the quantity of gas that is required, the air that is being consumed, and the higher temperature gas that was being emitted at 300 plus degrees Celsius today is effectively being sent at 100 degrees. So these are all the supplementary, though it's not spoken much because people are only focused about CO2, how much CO2 we generate, but the quantum of hot gases that we generated also has come down. From that perspective, also Indian industry is ahead of curve. Now, one of the areas which is slowly evolving is the alternate fuels that is used for the thermal fuel substitution, sir. Yeah, that the evolved world is much ahead of the Indian industry. Today, on average, we are consuming only at a TSR level, that is the thermal substitution rate, is at less than 1% now as we speak. But in the evolved world, yeah, that is close to around 15 to 20%. So that is one area where we are slightly behind, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time over the next 5 years with the new regulations and the governmental support and the other industry support that is coming up. Yeah, it's only a matter of time when I'm sure we would be surpassing the evolved world. Yeah, what I would like to say in a simple terms is we most of the industry on an average consumes coal, sir. So if I'm able to replace 1% of total coal consumption by volume, not only by volume, but at the thermal substitution, that would be a big achievement, because bulk of this alternate fuel that is getting consumed is actually could be a waste product or a product of less interest to the generator, and they probably are struggling to dispose of this. And we are also extremely proud that the cement kiln is one of the best incinerator that can exist on earth. So we can consume very difficult material because bulk of that would get washed away with the CO2 that gets generated. So not much of dioxins or difficult emissions. They actually get consumed or washed off in the cement kiln. So by virtue of that, the cement kiln is supposed to be one of the best incinerators that can happen to very difficult materials, which most of the generators would happen. Just to give you an example, bulk of the pharma sector, especially for their bulk drugs and all, they generate a lot of material which have been extremely difficult for them to dispose of. Once they take useful products, whatever is not useful to them, yeah, that is having a huge potential in terms of the heat rate, but are also extremely difficult for the disposal. So cement sector is one which actually came forward and started consuming extremely safely and viably for us, even for them. Earlier for them, the disposal was extremely challenging, even environmentally and financially. So it was a win-win kind of a situation which got bridged up. Though still we are still consuming less than 20% of their byproducts or the waste products. Not all the sector has come, but slowly all of us started investing onto the technology that is required to absorb them at a massive scale. Yeah, that is happening. So it's only a matter of time that we reach out to most of the evolved world, kind of replacing these fossil fuels with those alternate fuels. Yeah, in our own case, 5 years back we were not consuming. Today we have reached to a stage where we are consuming close to 4.5% replacement has happened on TSR. On a volume front, we have actually replaced 20% fuels. That means 20% of their fuels we started consuming, and we are consuming it very safely because our emissions are fully managed, monitored, controlled by us, and even monitored by the external CPCB and local PCB. So we have reached to a stage where we are able to safely consume them without any harmful emissions that is happening. Last but not the least is the bigger landfill is actually happening with the municipal solid waste, sir. Yeah, that is one area where I think the sector is still, it's a work in progress. But there is a lot of work that is happening on this issue. Yeah, the municipal solid waste sounds very easy, but huge landfills are happening with the for the disposal. But there is great work that is happening from the waste management companies as well as our own industry, how to safely consume that and avoid the landfill, because as you know, one of the scarcest commodity is the land. So the industry is also trying to invest and see how we could consume. Yeah, we as a company and as an advisory firm is aggressively looking at that options. Once that happens, sir, I'm sure we would surpass all the targets that the government has given us, and I think we would be in a stage where we could consume 80% of the MSW, but it needs huge support from the municipalities as well as the government. There are challenges in terms of the collection. Some amount of treatment is required at the receipt side, and huge investment is also required from our side. So these are some of the things that industry has done, which is slightly ahead of curve compared to most of the evolved world, sir. Though the evolved world consumes most of these alternate fuels in a very big way, but that doesn't offset the average energy that Indian cement industry consumes for ton of clinker.
Right.
So that itself, we are close to around 8 to 9%. If I'm only conservatively keeping my neck out, but we consume 15% lower energy than most of those people, even to make per ton of clinker. I'm only cautiously using clinker because up to clinker and post clinker is a different ball game altogether, because the blending comes into picture. Now the conversion factor from clinker to cement, we are relatively slightly lower, I would put it, than most of the evolved world. The building code book and the regulations are pushing us, and even industry also is gearing up, and consumer also is preparing to accept higher blend. Today, the conversion factor from clinker to cement also is relatively lower, sir. The day we touch 1.3 on an average, I think we would be one of the most efficient players in the world as a sector. And even the construction material is going to come down from 8%. We are super confident that we'll start coming down close to around 5 to 6%. But that's work in progress. But fortunately, work is happening at a very rapid pace. So in our own case, sir, our blending was relatively low because the market that we were servicing was not accepting the higher blends. But as a company, from sub 1.15 tons of cement for each ton of clinker, today we are very proud that we have reached to a number of 1.25. And this year, I think we would be crossing 1.3 tons of cement would be made with clinker. For each of this point additional we would be producing, sir, yeah, it would be taking us to be one among the lowest GHG emitters across the world itself. So unfortunately, the benchmark numbers are still not yet standardized, sir. So everybody loosely talks of up to cement, But in our view, that should not be the number. It should be looked up to clinker separately and cement separately. But we have to live with what most of the bigger players would look at it. But even if we have to look at it loosely with the numbers there, the average Indian cement industry is at par or above par to most of the global players. Sir. I'm counting all the big names here. I'm not discounting any of that, Sanjeev.
That's great to hear. So actually, let's try and put in some numbers from a finance. So if we were to now move towards the norms that over a period of time, and people are talking about we probably have to do carbon capture or any of those things. In terms of either OPEX or CAPEX, does the cement industry in India, will the cost go up for production?
Yeah, Sanjeev, I think it's an important topic and a hot topic. So now whatever we have spoken so far is not talking of what you said as carbon capture, the CO2 capture actually. Yeah, the technology is evolving, so it has not reached to a stage where the industry is ready to accept. So most of the agreements are happening, but it has not reached to a stage where we can comment much on that. But now let me say something here. Yeah, we have been extremely busy looking at the technology that is coming out on the CO2 capture as well as the utilization post capture. The challenge 2 years back was that per ton of CO2 capture, it was costing $100, $100 per ton of capture. Leave alone the utilization part, Sanjeev. Now our product is one among the lowest cost producers. I don't think there is any product which is so low cost compared to cement. Especially in India, it is one among the highly taxed. So I'm sure most of you are aware that we are placed along with the seen goods at 28%. And the freight is 30% of our overall kind of a cost structure. And energy, leave alone the energy costs, which are even higher. So in spite of having very high cost inputs, especially in form of energy, the freight and the tax structure, still the product is one among the lowest cost. We are literally talking of sale itself happens at less than $100, Sanjeev, in spite of all of them. So just for a capture, a CO2 at $100 was something which we would not imagine. It's not the case here, but it is the case across the world. The only county, I'm not even talking of the country, the only county in the world where there is a carbon tax is in California, which is in US. There they started with 100. Now I think it is somewhere around $80 to $50, but it has not been very successful because cement is, though not viewed from that perspective, is one of the basic staples. Because just to say that human and average human consumes less than 100 to 125 kg of wheat or rice or any of the staples that they consume. In India itself, which is one among the lowest per capita, we actually consume twice to that. So right. Having a very expensive cement is not good in the interest of the humanity. So it's not just being efficient, though we pollute, but it's still too early for us to tax ourselves. It would be taxing humanity itself. So the evolution that is happening on the capture side over last 2 years, there are a lot great progress that has been made. So this $100, yeah, we keep hearing has come down to close to around $30. So unless it comes to less than $2 or $3, I don't think industry would be in a situation to adopt that. Because the challenge is not in the capture, sir. The challenge is in the what we do with the post capture.
Right.
Now, the storage is not a solution. As I told you, for a million ton plant, we end up producing 0.8 million tons of CO2, and it's a gas cell. So the storage is not a feasible solution because the storage for our end product itself is very, very minimal. So leave alone for the gas. So it's important that whatever is being captured should simultaneously be put to use in some form, which is of certain value. Now, utilization, one of the easiest is to put back into the earth. People call it as EOR, where whatever we are capturing, if it is put back into where the oil is extracted, So at some point, I believe it actually ends up becoming an oil. At least that's in theory. I strongly believe if scientists say that it will become oil at some point of time, I also strongly believe it will become oil. But yeah, it probably is a feasible for people who are very close to the port, whoever have a clinker line very close to the port, but you hardly have 5% of the global cement is produced on the periphery of the ocean or the sea where it can be pumped back into thing. Yeah, the inward transportation is one of the difficult challenges across the world, and in India it is twice the problem. So that is still not yet evolved. So with greatest difficulty, useful gas is being pumped into the inland with such a huge investment, sir. Yeah, we hope at some point of time these pipelines would also be laid for the CO2 to go out, but at this point of time it is exorbitantly high. Now, yeah, there are some people who could technically make this captured CO2 into useful fuels, but I believe it costs $300 to convert the captured CO2 into something which is very useful, and it is costing $300. Now the end product, I believe, is sold at $50. So a $250 subsidy, I don't think industry is in a situation to really offset it. So what I'm trying to say is $5 capture and probably another $20 kind of a substitution, or let us assume that it is not cost subsidized. But even if we have to spend this $5 to $10 capture and we make an end product at $50, which is the end product, which is substitution for that, the reality of it in terms of capture and trying to talk of being carbon neutral is still probably 5 to 10 years away is what we think. We honestly hope that it comes before, but it's still work in progress and it's in infancy. But work is happening, sir. Work is happening. Now, one of the reasons why we are very hopeful is the hydrogen itself. Yeah, one of the easiest is if I have hydrogen, sir, yeah, CO2 can be made into very, very useful products, especially the methanol or ethanol or any of the fuels that one can look at it. Yeah, hydrogen capture or hydrogen generation itself is an expensive proposition. Now, the problem with hydrogen is the equation looks very easy. You do electrolysis of water, especially the salt water or the brackish water, you end up getting water and hydrogen, which is relatively easier, but you need huge quantity of energy for you to make that hydrogen. It's something which we are excited. There is a lot of progress that is being made in hydrogen. The reaction is very simple, sir. CO2 that we capture and the hydrogen, when you break down, it can give you wonderful products. It can give you all the carbon cycles that one can imagine. Great chemicals which are petrochemicals, aviation fuels. It can substitute the thing. Of course, hydrogen by virtue of itself could be fuel, but the captured CO2 can be converted into any of these things, sir. Yeah, though there are some proven chains, reactions which doesn't need big thing, but it needs hydrogen, sir. So, but we are anxiously waiting for the hydrogen generation to be a lot more economical. So it's only a matter of time that our industry or the product itself could become carbon neutral and could also be carbon positive. Rather CO2 negative, where we could contribute to the economies where if some other person is generating CO2, our industry can consume even that and get the things done. Yeah, just to give you some of the interesting organizations that have done tremendous work on this is one name that comes up is Carbon Engineering, sir. Yeah, where they are trying to capture the CO2 from thin air and try to convert into transportation fuels. But that's a company which is a startup where there are big names that have been invested. So where we are also had an opportunity to look at their technology to get consumed. But the financial feasibility, technical feasibility is there. The economic feasibility is still not yet come for our product, Sanjeev. Hope address the question
Sure.
that you had on this.
Absolutely. So maybe quickly what we can do is we can talk about Sagar Cement's experience in ESG and especially IFC's contribution to what you have done. You had some lovely slides also that I saw. I think if we can share that, that'd be great.
Sure,
Like what
Sanjay. Now let me place on record the huge contribution that IFC has done for ourselves. I'm not talking of financial, sir. Yeah, but what is very important is the evolution itself. Yeah, as I mentioned in my opening remarks itself, that we have had a chance to go through these principles of ESG for more than 1.5 decades. Yeah, they are instrumental in introducing us the importance of looking at non-financial numbers, especially when you talk of non-financial numbers. Yeah, at that point of time, if you talk of environment very objectively, it was very, very intangible. Yeah, when you talk of social, yeah, you think that if you buy somebody's land and you have paid 10,000 more, you are excited. And governance, of course, was corporate governance. You are fully complying, you are very happy. Not fully, but reasonably compliant. You thought you look around, and if you are complying more than your neighbor, yeah, you are excited and you are very, very confident and comfortable with that. Now, the reason why I always get this IFC contribution in our ESG was the world was not talking much on this, sir. And being a multilateral funding agency and a development agency, it was very important if you were taking any money in either in equity form or in a debt form, it was very important that they justify an investment into an organization which was contributing on any of these three parameters, sir. In fact, for them, there is an extra parameter which is also safety aspects. So we and they had, by then, I'm talking of 2005, sir. Yeah, they had performance standards, what they used to call. Yeah, they had initially 5 performance standards. Now they actually went with 8 of them. Now, lately, probably a decade back, yeah, the UN came up with the sustainability aspects, and now we have 17 sustainability goals. Yeah, whatever we talk, this ESG is a broader part of a broader risk management or mitigation framework, sir. And this is the essence of the sustainability itself. Sustainability is not just the financial numbers, but the sustainability of the business and the humanity itself. So these are subsets. ESG is more a subset of sustainability or the risk management or the mitigation framework itself is what our understanding is. Now, let us start looking at each of these words separately. Yeah, E is environment. So as I mentioned to you, yeah, our understanding of environment at that point of time was more being dust free and fully compliant with the then emission norms. But what was very important is cement is one of the larger capital incentive kind of an industry, sir. So whenever you are trying to come, yeah, the importance was not given to how the emission norms would come. So most of the investment used to be very narrow and myopic to look at, am I complying with right now or not? So what we have learned is you cannot keep on investing every day. So we wanted to be, we were made to understand, and we appreciated the fact that any investment that you do now should hold up for future, not for now. So we had to understand the evolving emission norms that were bound to come. So at that point of time, 100 milligrams per nm cube was the norm, sir. So if you were looking at any, yeah, the dust norms at that point of time, 1.5 decade was 100 to 150 milligrams per each nm cube of air was the norms. Europe was slightly ahead at 75. Indian norms were under revision. But IFC insisted that, we should look beyond that. So they insisted that we should look at 25 to 30 milligrams as an nm cube. I'm talking of 2005, sir. So that norms actually came 5 years back. But IFC convinced us that you cannot keep on investing. So that those emission norms at that point of time. The reason why we were also convinced is very, very simple. Because you asked a question telling that, is it going to increase the cost? Now, the reality was that we perceived that it would add up to huge costs because we were trying to go beyond our requirements. But the reality was, sir, cement perception is that it is very, very dusty. You have to go to a plant where you would be knee deep into the dust and all. But what is that dust, sir? See, you are spending a lot of money in mining. Again, you are spending a lot of energy to make it fine powder, and you are heating it again, making it into fine powder. So if you are again at that point of time, people were only conscious about the investment capital, but a lot of money used to go out in terms of OPEX. Because what is this fine dust? It's actually your money itself. Because it's a material, and for you to make it into fine powder, you are actually spending a lot of energy. So we realized that why should I put this dust outside when it is actually useful to me? And the entire investment is to do this itself. So why it should be outside? It actually should be packed and sold. So when we looked at these norms, it was very, very easy for us. We convinced that okay, we are probably ahead of curve, but we wanted to go ahead and invest on this. And most of this dust was coming out because of the leakages, sir. And leakages are not good. No, the pilferages or leakages or any of that. And we started trying to go ahead and start doing A, we were energy efficient investments. B, yeah, we were not only complying with some of the standards which were about to come, but the reality was we were actually becoming even more efficient. And a cleaner house is always a nice thing even from a safety perspective. And it's not just about the look and feel, sir. In reality, we were actually becoming lot more efficient, and at the same time, keeping a clean environment saves on many things, sir. Your maintenance time is very lower. Your motivation levels of all your stakeholders, the important stakeholders, which is your own employees, which is us, also is extremely high. Your downtimes would be very, very low. So perception was that we are going to increase the cost, but the reality was that we were becoming efficient, and at the same time, we were improving the overall kind of standards, sir. Perception is very different from the reality, sir. And we have been an extremely good example for most of the people. I mean, our excitement when you invited us, not many people would be willing to talk to us on these counts, sir. Yeah, we are extremely proud that our assets, some of the assets are 40 years old. But if somebody has to see them, yeah, they are as new as we are. The only reason why we have done is because of the performance standards, what they named then, and we started appreciating at that point of time. One of the good things for us was we were small, so adopting a change was relatively easier for us, and we were investing at that point of time. So that also has helped us to adopt these things which probably looked ahead of time at that point of time, which looked like we were adding cost. But 1.5 decades later, sir, I don't think from a cost side, we are at par or better than most of my bigger peers, smaller peers, or whoever it could be. And this did not happen overnight, sir. This happened because we appreciated then, and we are probably getting the fruits of those adherence to those norms now. That's what I would like to highlight. They never added costs, sir. I would say that momentarily they would have added some additional capex, but on a medium term, I think they paid out for themselves, and now they are paying much more faster than in the past, sir. Because now with coal being very expensive and per unit cost going higher, I think that is adding up to the margins now. The investments that we have made for a better environment then actually started contributing much more financially now than before. That is one part. Now let us look at the social things, sir. Now what is this social thing, sir? It's not just the CSR. Sir, it's all to do with how you would handle your stakeholders. I'm not talking of financial stakeholders alone. The internal stakeholders, how their working standards are. As I mentioned to you, once you address the cleanliness and no leakages, half of the safety aspects and better working conditions are extremely good for socially, that your own important stakeholder is very, very comfortable home. Yeah, happy worker actually makes a happy family for himself, sir. So that rub-off effect. Now let us talk about the other stakeholder, which is the people. It's a very tangible and a large resource consuming kind of a commodity, sir. We need large tranches of land because it is to do with the mining. And you have large people because it's a bulk commodity. So you have your truck operators, you have all your supply chain that comes into picture. So our footprint socially is very, very higher. So that is second part. The last but not the least is the project affected people. The direct affected people are the ones who are in the neighborhood. Probably they get impacted on two things, sir. One, because of the emissions, the dust emissions which are very visible, and the gas emissions which are secondary. And secondly, yeah, they are the people who probably would have given away their land where they had some livelihood. Now, how do you address this issue? Now, if you look at the performance standards, sir, yeah, they had 5, as I mentioned. There are actually 8 of them. I keep repeating, going back to them because not many people probably are aware about the contribution those World Bank and IFC has done for these ESG standards as they are getting evolved. So in those, sir, they have come up with these 8 performance standards which more or less encompass all the social parameters one has to look at it. Namely, if you have a graveyard, how do you protect? There is a standard. Now, how do you handle the project affected people? Because there could be a person who probably has 3 acres of land which you are buying away, and he was solely dependent on that for his livelihood for future. And he has to give you land for your asset, and you cannot wish away just by paying him money. Yeah, we cannot assume that he is becoming richer because he has to sustain his livelihood forever. There is a very clear-cut guideline that was being there at that point of time. In fact, we acquired close to 6,000 acres of land much before the Land Acquisition Act came in 2010, sir. Yeah, we were acquiring large tranches of land for our project requirement right from 2006 onwards. But we were extremely proud because we never had any issue, because fundamentally we believe that wherever your asset is there, if your neighborhood is peaceful with you, you will be extremely successful, sir. If you are not, you would be extremely busy managing that particular aspect. And with the IFC coming in and trying to educate us this at a slightly higher level than what we have understood at that point of time. So it was very important for us to study whom we are buying land, their social profile, their economic profile is must for us. In fact, most of the people think that it is useful for greenfield, sir. Yeah, it was also important for us when we acquired an asset, though that asset was built 5 to 6 years much before we bought it. Yeah, we have adopted similar kind of a principles. We went back to the same people who gave away the land. Half a decade later, we had to reconnect with them, understand their social consciousness or requirement. We went back to them, studied. For some people, it needed additional support. Yeah, we systematically contribute to them even now. Bulk of the thing comes, yeah, our CSR looks very small numbers, sir, but our expenditure, we don't book that as CSR, but it is part of our regular OPEX. Yeah, we keep on spending on them to enhance the livelihood on the social side. Yeah, this is some of the bigger contribution that we have been doing. That is one of the reason why our growth has been very, very seamless, sir. We could do public hearing in most of the difficult places. Yeah, we were extremely successful in either land acquisition or mine acquisitions, because it was very easy for us to get the project affected people to the places where we have successfully conducted all these things, and we are continuing to do that, sir. Yeah, that aspect is, we are extremely proud. I think we are one among the very few people who can showcase any of these events very, very structuredly and systematically. So that is one of the social aspects which unfortunately in any of the ESG metric, it doesn't come up. Yeah, in ESG metric now, it is easy for us to reflect how much you have spent on education, health and all. That we are doing it. But the bigger and important aspect of how you handle the social aspects, right from the project conceptualization, implementation and beyond that, I think these are the core foundations which once you start appreciating, it becomes seamless, sir. And third but not the least, which is the governance, sir. I mean the G part. Yeah, governance is not just the board, sir. Yeah, your compliance, your independence of your board, sir. All these things is risk management, right? How well for your stakeholders, your efficiency of the board. That the guidelines are evolving. It is important that every bit of guideline needs to be adhered to. But what is very, very important is you have a lot of compliances, sir. In fact, for a cement plant, for each unit, independent of the organ, you have close to around 3,000 to 3,500 touch points where you need to comply. Some of them are weekly, some of them are fortnightly, some of them are monthly, quarterly, half yearly, and annually. Close to around 3,000, 3,500. They are equally important. And if you look at mines alone, there are 600 touch points on these compliances. See, each of them, if you don't comply, they would come back and bite you. It's not a financial issue. It's a risk issue. It's your existential issue. But unfortunately, as I told you, the governance metrics are still evolving stage. And these are highly dependent on sector that you are in, and industry you are in, and the state you are in. But unfortunately, there is not much of a standardization. So what is very, very important is now there are compliances. It is very simple. There is a CEO, COO, and the managerial kind of a certification given to the board saying that we are adhering to all of them. It's a simple signature. But how would an independent director qualify? Is it just because of the trust that they take it? No, there is a lot of systems that you have to build where it is not just the trust or the perception, sir. It has to be very objectively and tangibly reflected for the compliance of each of them. So internally, we worked extremely hard to have a very transparent workflow methodologies to reflect on fully adhering to the governance, other than the things which get reflected, because thanks to the regulatory kind of a framework, being a listed company, yeah, there are a lot of adherences that you do. Those are only 10% in our view about any of these ESG parameters that get reflected in the metrics, sir. There is much more, Sanjeev. So
Sure.
that's what I would like to highlight. I can continue, but that's where.
No, that's great, sir. Thank you for the detailed one. So maybe I'll just move to the industry now. We are kind of, a bit short on time. So if I look at the next 3, 4, 5 year outlook in terms of both competitive landscape, you've seen some new players entering, like you heard Adani talking about it and so on. Do you think, over the last few years, we've actually seen consolidation? Do you think that the consolidation phase is over and we are moving now back to some more new competition coming in? That's one. And how are you placed in terms of, doing this? So, yeah.
Yeah, Sanjeev, I have to admit, 5 years is not even short for us. Because from a concept to commission the plant itself is 5 years, Sanjeev. But anyhow, I mean, the market long term is not even a short term. But I have to let me stick to what you have asked, sir. See, I think this commodity is something which is, as I mentioned to you, basic, sir. It's a basic commodity. It's a very fundamental commodity. It's a wonder product. So there are two aspects. One has to be very careful. Is there going to be a replacement to it? I doubt there is going to be a replacement. I don't think there would be a supplementary product. There could be a lot of complementary products that might come. For next 30 years, I can keep my neck out to say that this product will exist. And every 30 years back, people said that, okay, next 30 years, something might come and replace. I think this is one of the old manufactured, may not be as old as steel, but this is one of the very old manufactured commodity as we speak. As I mentioned, it's a wonderful product and it has been kind to all the stakeholders for as long as it has existed, sir. So people will still keep coming. Just to be very specific, yeah, India has close to around 450 odd million tons of capacity. I would not go to the debate. I'll accept the numbers like my good friends like Amit has given. So 450 million. Consumption is somewhere close to around 350 odd million. I think this should double over next 15 years in terms of the demand. Supply over last 1.5 decade was extremely rapid, sir. 100 became 400 in last 15 years. I think next 15 years, at the best, 100 million would get added up because of the regulatory issues or the capex return ratios or any of that. But the demand from 300 is definitely expected to go to 600 in a reasonably quick time. From here on, the ability to add up a lot more supply is only shrinking. I would not say difficult, but it is going to add up time and additional money. So that would make
that also. Sorry, sir. Is that also because of the limestone issue, or?
Sir, limestone is abundantly available, but viably available. the regulatory time frames that are required is going to add up. I don't think it is going to be extremely impossible, but timelines and everything is going to make it that much more challenging. Because if you look at last decade, sir, return ratios are not that compelling. So this is a large capex in capital intensive kind of a sector. Unless the capital comes, industry cannot grow. So we strongly believe that even that is going to be, which is one of the difficult and scarce other than land is the capital, sir. So that also is going to be limited. So the supply may not be as rapid as it has happened over last one and a half decade. So newer people would come, but see, consolidation is out of 420 million, sir. Yeah, numbers might look like around 250 or million is on a consolidated kind of a number, but the other 150 is spread among 40 people. So you have as many actors, as many players, sir. Yeah, top 10, probably top 15 might contribute to 60% over next decade. So there could be a consolidation in the top 15. Yeah, small 1 or 2 acquisitions could happen at the bottom end, sir. But it is going to grow, sir. Newer people are going to come. Existing players probably are going to merge. But it's a work in progress. So I would never say that consolidation is reached to a peak or it's not yet started. It's work in progress is what I would like to say, sir. Now our own view is that we double every decade, sir. Our start point is 2000. We started in 82. So we continue to add, but our production is in 87. So internally, we take 7 as the number, sir. Every 7, that is 18 to 28, we should double. 28 to 38, we will be doubling, sir. I mean, every 10 years from the current status, we will be doubling. That's the stated objective, and we work towards that, sir. And we want to be a relevant player, relevant from a market perspective, even from a size perspective to the market, sir. So that's what we work extremely hard on that.
Sure, sir. So I'll open the floor to question and answer. So if anybody has any questions, please do type in the Q&A box. So we'll just wait for 2 minutes, sir, for the question. Sir, the first question has come. So cement used to grow at faster than GDP, and then but last few years it has actually grown less than the GDP growth. So what do you think? And you did mention a growth outlook, but what are the key drivers that you think will make it grow faster than GDP?
Sanjeev, I think a lot of people have some correlation with the GDP. Some people say it is 1.2, some people say it's 1.5. Sir, cement consumption will grow. As people are growing, consumption will definitely grow. Drivers are very, very clear, sir. I think housing is the important driver, and we are short on them. I think it will take another 50 to 60 years before we become like any other evolved country where the housing growth is very minimal. But in India, housing has to grow and infrastructure has to grow. So I would not like to put any number in terms of a correlation with the GDP to that of cement. You can safely take as 1:1, sir. If GDP has to grow, cement has to grow, and vice versa, sir. So this is one commodity which we know for sure would double from the current demand every 15 years. I'm trying to be conservative. It will grow because a lot of people have a perception about the capacity utilization that of the growth of the cement demand, sir. It has been the case for every 15 years it has doubled. I think that would be the case even going forward also, sir.
Sure, sir. So the next question is on the limestone. So it seems that once the auction process starts, would that increase the cost of limestone? Also, old limestone mines are coming up for renewal. Do you think that will impact anything?
Yeah, Sanjeev, let me have a word of caution here. See, I think the auction process itself is a evaluatory work in progress, sir. It's still not yet evolved completely. Yeah, there are some auctions that have happened so far, which happened at a very extreme pricing. that is not at a sustainable level, sir. In general, cost is likely to go up. Primary reason is with the general inflation, sir. And in our general understanding, sir, regulatory changes also has an inflation, sir. They add up, so it could be very similar to that. But that alone may not contribute to the cost, sir. There are many other factors which could contribute to the cost itself. Your land acquisition cost post auction also could contribute. So auction alone is not a contributor, sir. So far the guidelines have come, but it's not fully evolved where we can keep our neck out to say that, oh, these guidelines would make the cost go up. No, there are some auctions which happen at a very similar costing what we are doing right now. There are some aggressive auctions that have happened at a ridiculous price where selling price of cement itself could not match to the buying price of limestone, sir. So both extremes have happened, but these are very, very minuscule auctions that have happened so far. So we probably may have to wait for a bit longer before we can have a big commentary on that, sir.
Sure, sir. Sir, another question that has come is in terms of southern market. So it seems that last 5 years so I'll read the question. So last 5 years, if you see the other markets other than South, we have seen much more consolidation where large top 5 players have about 60% capacity. However, in South, it is despite oversupply, despite issue, it still remains much more fragmented than the rest.
Sanjeev, now let me put the other way around. Now you have more players in an evolved market, sir, not in a slower markets, right? See, the other regions, especially if you look at Northeast is something which we don't monitor much, so I have very limited information or knowledge on that, sir. Central, number of players as such are very few, sir.
Right.
If you look at South, for 160 million installed capacity, you have as many number of players, sir. You have 40 players.
Yeah.
So naturally, and why do you think the supply comes so fast, sir? It is purely because of the market. The only thing is we could not probably time the supply with that of demand scale up. That's the only reason. But none of the people went out of business even with very low operating rates, sir. Why do you think that will happen? See, this is something which one has to pragmatically look at it. And I personally feel this itself can consume a lot of time. But at this point of time, what I would like to highlight is South is not a bad market to invest, sir.
Right. Okay. So another question that has come is sorry, I think this is you have already answered this question. So again, I think I did mention it briefly, but do you see people like we've seen earlier people like Reliance or even Jaiprakash has all gone out, but now you have some new names that are coming up like Adani and so on. Do you see any competition? What's your view on the competition?
Sir, let me ask you one question. You have so many farmers and 2 farmers producing wheat. Are they competitors, sir?
Right.
Same is the case with our commodity. Why you think there is a competition? I think, sir, when 2 rice growers or wheat growers right next to each other coexist and do their own work very simplistically and easily, I think that is the case with even another commodity producer like cement. Unfortunately, the perceptions are very, very different, sir. So new or old, it should not matter, sir. Why? People will keep coming. Why do they come? Because this is such product where everybody wants to be in it, sir. See, there could be new to the market, there could be new to region, there could be new to the business itself, sir. That we have been seeing it historically, we will continue to see, sir. Because that is the beauty of the product that we are dealing in. It's not beauty of sector alone. Yeah, that is the beauty of the product, sir. Sir, competition, let me ask you one thing. Sir, out of all these people, you have very small player to very large player. And you look at South, yeah, the smallest player probably is 100,000 tons per annum. And the biggest player is 100 million guy. All of them have been existing for more than 2 to 3 decades, sir. And all of them have been surviving, right? Now, are we surviving because of our efficiency? I think that is partly true because you make more money if you are efficient and you grow faster. But all of us are surviving, right? That is because of the product, sir. I mean,
right. Sure. So next question, this you already again partly answered, but again, very specific, that despite such low capacity utilization in South, why is more capacity being added?
Sir, I think people see historically South ease of doing business in South is phenomenal, sir. I mean, I think it is very, very easy to do difficult things in South. That includes putting up cement plant. And you have demand in South which sanely grows, sir. Though it might be volatile if you look at certain period of time, but if you stretch it longer, yeah, it actually doubles much faster than all India, sir.
Right.
It is unfortunately very volatile. Either it grows by 20% or degrows by 15%. So that makes people think that South is very difficult market. That is not true, sir. Sir, you take our own example. Yeah, we were 2008, we were 500,000, sir. And today we are 5.75 with almost 80% of our business in South. My capacity utilization is 55% on an average, sir. Don't you think my balance sheet is stronger? And we are talking of 5.75 and we are talking of becoming a 10 million by 2025. I think it is to do with the product itself, sir. I think regionally people tend to look at certain time frames where it would definitely be challenging. But as I told you that our time frames, our short term itself is not long term for the market, sir. Market's long term is not even our short term, sir.
Sure. Sir, I think that is all the questions. So one, I would like to request, you're showing some slides, before and after slides. Maybe we can share those if you.
Yeah, Sanjeev, I would like to definitely share all the slides. What I would like to mention here is, see, the integrated report framework that has come is one of the best that we have seen, which truly reflects financial numbers along with the non-financial numbers, sir. So I would request your team to circulate to all the participants, and if you could help spread that. Not only ours, I think it is something which is evolving. That is one of the great metric one can see to benchmark how each industry, well within the sector, how industry players are doing.
No, sir, I completely agree. But I've read your report, and I think it's one of the best.
So let me start sharing. Yeah, before after. Yeah, because I did mention to you before that we are very proud about what IFC has done for us. So let me share with you the simple pictures of how they used to look earlier. And they were not black and white pictures, sir. They were not long. Let me show you. This is the preheater. It's built like anybody else. Yeah, these are all the old storages and all. Yeah, today it is called EHS center, sir, where it is an environment, health and safety center. So any person who is entering has to go through that. So we actually started making use of the place itself. You can see how it was before to how it is now. Sir, this is a 40-year-old asset, sir. Okay. Now you can look at it how it used to look before, sir.
Right.
It is exactly the same, sir. The sheds that you are seeing here are covered, and mind you, sir, yeah, all these are outcrop. There is no soil, sir. I mean, when you look at this patch, it is all limestone, sir. So if you look at the greenery that has been developed, and just to showcase, sir, yeah, this is one of the old generation cement plant, which is a vertical shaft kiln. So it was smoking then, it is smoking even now. This picture that I've taken is today's picture, sir. This is 8-year-old picture, sir.
Right.
Yeah, you can see the same substation. Yeah, this is our plant colony, sir. Now you see the quantum of greenery that has come up. Yeah, you can see this plant where there was no railway line. This is our mine. Even today, this is our mine, sir. But see the quantum. Of course, railway line has come, sir. This is the power plant. Now, in fact, we are coming up with one of the widest sheds in the business, where we are investing almost 30 crores to cover the entire fugitive emission. The coal and limestone is coming like an airport hangar, sir. So you can see the greenery, you can see the plant, and we coexist socially, sir. This is all the farmers, sir. This is not company land where they are doing the farming. They used to do then, even now.
Right. This is great.
So just wanted to reflect. Of course, I can go on, but Sanjeev, again, sincerely appreciate your invitation to participate in it.
No, I think we've learned a lot, sir, and I think that's great. And as you said, so we'll also circulate your integrated report, which is really amazing. And cement, I guess, will continue to remain a bit, in the eye of the storm from a environment perspective. But as you said, what was very heartening to hear was that Indian industry is in many aspects, actually, we are in a better situation than globally. So that's actually pretty heartening. So let's see, and thank you very much for participating.
Yeah, Sanjeev, again through you, I would request if any of the questions remain unanswered,
Sure.
would be more than happy to take those questions either through Amit or they can contact. Would be
Right.
extremely happy to share whatever information you would have on this, Sanjeev. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Stay safe and take care, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you very much. Okay.